Hey everybody, it's January 1st, 2021, and I've been making a lot of ink pens recently getting ready for craft shows and market days this coming year. So I thought I'd take you along with me and let you see the steps and processes of how I turn ink pens. Alright, so we've decided to turn an ink pen, and ink pens and pencils have multiple components to them, and you can order those components in small kits. And this is an example of one of the kits that you can order. And you're only limited by your imaginations. These come in gold, chrome, gunmetal, black, and all different types of sizes and shapes. So once you decide on your components that you're going to use, then you have to decide on what's called the blank, or the material that you actually see that makes up the ink pen. And you're only limited there again on your imagination, because there are hundreds upon hundreds of brightly colored acrylic blanks. You can get what they call a hybrid blank or a combination blank, where it is actually pieces of wood and acrylic. You can use deer antler or bone. And what I really enjoy doing is actually going and harvesting the material myself, cutting down trees off of friends' properties that they need cut down or removed, and then processing the larger pieces down to the sizes of pen blanks that are needed. The smallest, typically the smallest pen blank you can have is a 5/8 inch square by approximately 4 inches long. That's about the smallest that you can get an ink pen. Alright, after selecting our pieces, the next thing is getting the blank ready. And the particular kit that we're working with has two of these brass inserts that go inside this blank. And what you need to do is you need to measure the blank to where you have two pieces that are just slightly longer than this brass tube. And then you'll cut it across the middle. I like to mark my blanks somehow so I can keep my centers orientated to each other. That way when you build the pen and you assemble the two pieces, your grain will be continuous and line up very nicely. So once you find the size that you need to cut these, you'll cut it into two. You can use whatever saw works for you, a chop saw, bandsaw, handsaw, whatever. Then, keeping the middles orientated to each other, you need to find the center of the blank, and I do that by drawing a line from corner to corner, and then using a brad point drill bit and this really nice handy pin drilling vise. And as long as my drill press table is straight, level, and true, and I use that brad point bit and start right on the center, I should be able to drill straight through this blank or right down the middle, preparing it for inserting the brass tubes. Alright, we're moving along to the point where we're ready to start assembling some of the components, and the first things you need to assemble is the brass tube insert into the wooden blank. And I think you can see on this particular tube how it's got a scuffed up surface. Some of the kits already come scuffed up, others have a smooth finish on them still that you need to roughen up a little bit. And I like to use 80 to 120 grit sandpaper and put some grooves and a little bit of roughness to these blanks so it gives the glue something to adhere to a little bit better. And you can use super glues, also called CA glues, or you can use the Gorilla Glues, and I believe these are a polyurethane type glue, and I like these a little bit better so far because they seem to maintain their elasticity a little bit and less of a chance of the pen and the wooden blank becoming separated. Your CAs finish up really hard and rigid and almost become brittle, where your polyurethane glues seem to stay a little bit more flexible. Anyhow, I strongly recommend when you're gluing up pen blanks to have some disposable rubber gloves handy and wear them. It keeps it all off your fingers, because what you basically do is you put glue on this brass tube and you start to insert it into the wooden blank. I like to twist and insert it a little bit, you'll have a buildup of glue. I'll pull the insert out and let that glue basically reapply itself to the insert, and then continue to rotate it and insert this to the point of barely seating it inside the pin blank. I don't know if you can see that very well, but that side is just barely recessed, and there's a little bit more room to work on here, so you could even push that insert in just a little bit more. And then set this aside. You'll do that for every piece of pin blank that you have. Set that aside and let it cure. The next step is using what's called a barrel trimmer. And let me bring it up here a little bit closer. You put this in your drill press, and then you take the blanks, put them back in that pin drilling vise, and you'll run this down and run this around the blank. And what that does is square this end off nice and square, in line with the brass tube insert. This is a quick example of what I'm talking about as far as how it squares the pin blank off with the end of the brass insert. And that will give you a nice, clean, like I said, 90-degree edge to the length of the pin blank. Alright, once again, back to that old saying of having the right tools makes the job easier. This is what is called a pin turning mandrel, and this is the live center that goes in the tailstock. And when you get ready to turn your pin, you have different sized bushings for each different kit. You can see how there's different sizes on both ends of that bushing. Here's another very simple straight bushing, and this is a particular one that we use for the fun line or the slim line pin kits. And you will take your pin blanks and slide that brass insert over this pin mandrel, take a bushing and place on there, and then take your other half of your pin blank, slide that on, and then another bushing. Bring your tailstock up, lock it in place, tighten it down, and this is the setup that you use for turning the blanks. And these bushings that I slid on the mandrel is the correct size for the components, and as long as I turn this material down to the same thickness on the ends, they will line up nice and smooth with the components, and anything between the ends can be whatever thickness and whatever shape you want. So your imagination is the only thing that limits you on your shapes and colors and looks that you end up getting with your pins. Alright, now that we've got everything set up on the pin mandrel, we've got our blanks there ready to go, we've got our tool rest put in place. Always manually rotate your materials to make sure that you're not striking your tool rest, and your common wood turning tools can be used for turning pin blanks. And I'm going to start out with a little spindle gouge real quick and just do a little bit of rough turning. Smaller, lighter weight diameter materials, you can spin at a higher RPM. What's the right RPM to turn? Just depends on the material and how comfortable you are with it. I've got this one right now cranked up to about 1700 RPMs. Let's do a little bit of roughing. Always anchor your tool on the tool rest, start riding the bevel, and bring it down until you start getting shavings. Bevel, raise the tool handle, shavings. Anchor on the tool rest. Lay the bevel on the material, slowly start bringing it back, raising the handle until it starts cutting. There I've got shavings. Now I can adjust and move. Alright, I'm just going to rough out some more real quick for you. I was getting a little too aggressive there. It slipped on me. I could probably tighten my tailstock up a little bit. That would help with that catching. See if I can get one clean pass here so you can see what this material looks like. Alright, let's zoom in a little bit there. You get a little bit of an idea of what this particular pin blank is going to look like. And as you change your contours, you'll get different character lines out of that wood grain. Here's a finished pin blank that is completely finished, turned, and the finish applied. And you can see, like I mentioned, as long as the ends are the same size as the bushings, anything in between is just up to your imagination. So I'll turn this down. I'll try to get it turned as smoothly as I can, and then I'll sand it. And I prefer to start with 180 or so, maybe a little bit higher, maybe 220. And I will turn my lathe on, reduce the speed down to about 300 to 400. And while it is rotating, I will sand it, but then I will turn it off and sand it with the grain as I rotate slowly and progress up through about 300 grit sandpaper. When I get to that point, then it's time to apply the finish. So once again, running about 300 or so, your pin components come in these neat little Ziploc bags, and I'll take the little Ziploc bag, slide it over tip my finger, use paper towel strips. The blue shop towels are a little bit better. They don't leave, they run less of a chance of leaving lint on your finish. And then I will take thin super glue as my first coat, hold the paper towel and start applying drips of super glue and rub it the whole length while it's rotating. Continue to apply a few drips, and you have to move kind of quickly on this because super glue sets up fast. Then I stop it, and while the super glue is still wet, I will rub it lengthwise with the wood grain. Do that with a coat of thin CA, and then several coats of medium CA, and then one last final coat of thin CA. After that sets up, I will then wet sand, which is just basically using a sanding abrasive. These are particularly, I like using these micro mesh pads, and they go all the way up through 12,000 grit. 12,000 grit is about like a piece of notebook paper, and I will do that while it's rotating, moisten my sanding pad, and sand it while it's rotating until I start building up a little bit of a film of a slurry in the water. And then I will shut it off, and once again I will sand with the grain of the wood, and I will run all the way up through 12,000 grit with the micro mesh. After that, I will take some type of a plastic polish, automobile plastic polish. This is Meguiar's. Headlight Restore paste or liquids also worked really well. But any of your plastic polishes for automobiles, apply a few drops to the paper, a clean paper towel, apply that on, turn it on, rub it in for quite a while, then I'll back off, let it haze over and dry, and apply it with about 200 to 300 RPMs. Let it haze over and dry, and then I'll crank the RPMs back up to about 1600, and then with a clean paper towel and a little bit of pressure, I will buff that plastic polish off. and then you end up getting a pin blank finished like this. Oh, let me see if I can get it to focus for you. There you go. A very nice shine and a very durable finish. Alright, now we have a finished pin blank ready for all the different components to be added into it, or pressed into it actually I should say. And they are just friction fit. You see there's a collar on that one that fits into the recess on the other component. And this is what's called a pin press. A good wood turning friend of mine made this for me and gave it to me as a gift, and I appreciate it. What you do now is you will take all the components and try to line them up in a straight line, because you want to press them in straight. And you will just put them in the pin press and apply pressure and squeeze those parts together. And here are a few finished ink pens that I have recently turned. Like I said, the only thing that limits you is your imagination on these, because of all the different colors of materials you can use for pin blanks, and then all the different colors of hardware. I appreciate you taking the time to watch, and I hope you enjoyed.